Hey everybody, let's talk about communication concepts, how they fit together, and how they affect our lives. We're going to look at four general areas. We're going to look at some communication models that'll help us understand the theory behind it. We're going to look at different types of communication. We're going to look at the different functions and needs that communication performs and the needs it fulfills for us in our lives. And we're going to talk about communication competence. What is communication competence? How can we become competent communicators? Competence is generally the idea that what you're trying to do is what is actually happening. So, a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, communication is a process. It doesn't happen all at once. We send a message to a person in one model, they send it back. In another model, we talk about our beliefs and how we see the world, and it evolves over time. It's not a single thing that happens and then that's it, it's done. It's always evolving. Another thing to note about communication is that it's symbolic, that the items we attach meaning to don't really mean anything, right? Like the words that we use don't really mean anything. It only means what we attach to it. And let's take the word word. It in and of itself is just a sound I make by pushing my cheeks together. Word, word, word. It doesn't mean anything. And we hear it changed over time. Not right now, it generally means a single symbol that we use in language, but we hear it a lot in music and we hear it a lot in regular conversation where people use it to emphasize that they understand where a person's coming from and agree. Word, right? It didn't mean that same thing 40 years ago. So it evolves as our society evolves. And communication is the process of creating meaning through symbolic interaction. That's a big definition. Communication is the process of creating meaning through symbolic interaction. And one of the easiest ways to understand that is to take a look at some different communication models. We generally have two. The first one is the transaction translation model, and it's a relatively complicated model. This model was invented in the 1940s by some scientists at IBM. They were trying to train other scientists about how a computer works. A computer was invented during World War II to help us crack the Nazi code machine, and it worked. And afterward, the government was dumping tons of money into research to try to get more computer scientists. We knew this computer thing was going to be great, and so we were trying to train other scientists. And so the people at IBM came up with this basic model. The basic idea of a sender who encodes a message and a receiver who decodes the message. So if you think of this as a computer puts a generate bit of information into a code and sends that bit of information to another computer or another part of the code. This is how the internet was invented. And we use it oftentimes for a model of human communication. It starts with the sender having an idea. They're playing a movie on the inside of their forehead, and they want to transfer that idea as much as they can, get another person to see the movie, the reality that they are seeing on the inside of their forehead. So they encode it into a message and send that message over to the receiver. The receiver tries to decode that message, tries to make some sense out of it. Remember, we said word, doesn't actually mean anything in and of itself. So when we try to put a thought, and we don't necessarily think in language, into a code, which is the language, another person tries to decode those words and figure out exactly what the sender is saying. Sounds kind of complicated, right? It is complicated. Humans are complicated creatures. And then to make this a little more complicated, we have noise that can get in the way. We very creatively named this noise. And there's lots of different kinds of noise. There can be actual noise, like a jackhammer outside. We can have psychological noise, like when someone's talking to us and we're thinking about something else. We could have all different kinds of noise. Maybe if we're in pain, that could be a noise. Anything that gets in the way of that message going back and forth we just call it noise. So that's the transaction model. And it's really a process of translation as well, because the words we use don't exactly mean the same thing to another person we're talking to. There was a really interesting study by a gentleman named Streifus, or Streifus. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. Doesn't really matter. And he talked to couples that had been married for a long, long time, like 35 plus years. And the more he interviewed these people, the more he started to discover that they could be married for 40 years. And their idea of on time isn't exactly the same idea as their partner's idea of on time. They could be just a little bit different. One person thinks that on time means you're 2 minutes early. The other person thinks that on time, it's okay if you're 2 minutes late. They still use that same term, and for 40 years haven't realized that they're conceiving it in a different way. They're translating the term on time differently for what they apply it to their world. And typically, when they discovered these misunderstandings, they also discovered that it is usually the source of problems in the relationship. So communication is the messy thing that isn't happening as neat and clean as we think, and oftentimes can lead to misunderstandings and problems. But it gets a little more complicated from there. When we look at the generative model. The generative model of communication is that meaning doesn't actually exist at all. We're generating meaning, and we generate meaning by talking to each other. What was once acceptable behavior then is now no longer acceptable behavior. The words themselves change meaning over time. And this is kind of a fun one. So about 5 to 10% of every language changes through every generation. About 150 years ago, when a person used the term conversation, it didn't mean like you were talking to someone else. A conversation was the manner in which you lived your life. Like maybe you are a peaceful farmer. Your conversation is that of a peaceful farmer. Where another person's conversation is a brave soldier. The manner in which they lived their life was that of a brave soldier. Somewhere along the way, the word conversation changed from the manner in which a person lives their life into a conversation that we think of, going back and forth and exchanging ideas with a person. So these meanings don't actually mean anything. And the easiest thing to look at is a stop sign. This is recognized all the world around. For some reason, a circle or a octagon in red with some white on it always means stop. You go to Europe, it means stop. You go to Asia, it means stop. You'll always tend to find, not I guess everywhere, but you'll tend to find different signs that have the same general shape. They'll be red, they'll be something like a circle, and we will all know that it means stop. How do we all know it means stop? Because we've bought into the generation of that meaning. We've bought into the idea that that means stop. And so we all have created the meaning, we've all generated the meaning that this particular shape means to stop. So we have the transaction and the translation communication model and the generative communication model. that our reality really doesn't mean what we think it does, but we have to apply meaning to symbols somehow, and so that's how we get through the world. We can also look, there's a lot of other really fun and intricate parts of communication. There's lots of different types of communication. You'll find these in your text, and the easiest way to think about them is the amount of feedback that you have. How much are you be able to trade information back and forth with communication partners? Is that avenue of giving feedback to a person as wide as their avenue of giving you information? So one of the easiest ones is, let's take a look. We have intrapersonal, which is where you're just talking to yourself. And we all do this inside our heads. Some of us do it out loud. And then we have interpersonal communication, where we're talking with other people. When we're talking with other people, like maybe one-on-one or just 2 or 3 of us standing there, then the channel of feedback is wide open. A person can share information with me, and I can feed back to them my information, my thoughts. The channels are wide open. It's really easy. And then it gets a little smaller from there. That feedback channel gets smaller from there. We go to small group interaction, which tends to be people between 4, 7 or 8, I guess, depending on how well the group gets along. And there's the most interaction, the most freedom in that smaller group, that people have to share their feedback with each other. But as the feedbacks, or as the groups get larger, it's more difficult. We have organizational communication. And this is like the type of communication you'll see at the office. You'll see in a large company, in an organization. It's not necessarily easy to give your ideas to everyone in the organization, but oftentimes there are methods that you can seek out individuals and share feedback with them by email or phone or a video call. Then we have public communication, which is most easily characterized by public speaking, where one or a few people talk and most of the people listen. It's very difficult for everybody in the audience to give feedback to the one person that's speaking. They don't have as many opportunities to give feedback. Their feedback channel is much smaller than the feedback or than the message sending channel of the person speaking. And then finally, we have mass media, which is generally press, radio, and films. Right? Like, it's really easy for you to get ideas through the TV. If the TV station wants you to have an idea, assuming you're not going to change the channel, it's pretty easy for them to convey that information. But it's relatively difficult for you to convey your thoughts or information back to the creators of that show. And I mean, there's ways we can do it. We can write a letter, we can get to social media, we can send them an email through their website. There's ways we can do it. But our ability to do it in real time and how much our message back to them matters, our ability to give them feedback is minimal. It's very unbalanced. So these are our general types of communication. We have interpersonal communication. We have small group communication, organizational communication, which happens in an organization, like a large company. We have public communication, like someone making a speech. And then we have mass communication, which in these days tends to be electronically transferred. Through press, the press being newspapers or magazines of some sort, radio, and films. One of the ways that this starts to get messy is think about how social media fits into it. When is social media like interpersonal or small group communication? When is it public communication? When you're looking at Instagram and someone is posting a picture, say it's Kim Kardashian. How much ability do you really have to give Kim Kardashian some feedback versus her ability to blast her message as she wishes? When we start to look at the feedback channel, it's easy to pick out which type of communication is which. And communication fulfills a bunch of functions for us. It satisfies several of our needs. The first one is physical. We physically need communication with people. Humans are social creatures, and we need to be able to interact with other humans. A lot for our physical needs, for your food, for your shelter, for your job. Like, we need other people. And also, that communication helps to form our identity. Like, we figure out who we are by interacting with other people. And that's kind of a difficult concept for some folks, but think of it like this. We typically will act the way other people expect us to act. And in some ways, that's really good. If people expect us to be good at school, people expect us to be there on time, we're probably going to be there on time and try hard because that's what is expected of us. But if we know that other people don't really expect us to show up at school, other people don't really expect us to do very good work, other people really don't expect us to pass this class, we will invest less time into that class, and it will change our identity between one model in which our identity is that of a good student and another model which our identity is not that of a good student. So communication fulfills the need to create our own identity. And obviously social. Like, for a lot of people, this is the most fun. And we have two different kinds of social. We have face-to-face communication and computer-mediated communication. FTF being face-to-face, CMC being computer-mediated. You'll see some of these acronyms sometime. It's basically that humans get enjoyment out of interacting with other humans. If you're an extrovert, you probably get a lot of enjoyment out of it. You feel recharged. It feeds your soul to interact with other humans. If you're an introvert, you tend to get your recharge. You get your soul fed when you're by yourself. You're doing things by yourself. You like that calm. You like that tranquility. But even at that, you enjoy having friends of some sort. Humans enjoy interacting with each other. So it helps fulfill that social need that we crave. And then, of course, there's the practical. It makes it easy to get through life. Can you please pass the salt? Excuse me, I'm trying to walk down this aisle. Thank you for my coffee, right? It builds those social bonds. It helps us get through the world. It helps us actually get through our day-to-day. And we have another concept of communication competence. Communication competence is essentially, are we being effective communicators? Is the message that we are sending effective? Is the point getting across? But not just, is it effective and appropriate? It has to be fitting for that situation. For example, if I want to send a message to a person that I disliked something they just said, I can either make a small micro expression, maybe furrow my brows, give them a head shake back and forth, say it's my cousin who I love very much. I just want to let him know, oh, that's not the best thing to say in this environment, right? I could do most of that non-verbally. And he would probably find that to be appropriate. Sure, I'm not embarrassing the guy. I'm letting him know. But what would also be effective is if I just turned and punched him right in the face. He would have a really clear idea that what he just said, I did not like. But it's not necessarily appropriate. So when we think about what's effective and appropriate, we have to think, is it effective and appropriate based on the opinions of both people? Do both people find the communication effective and appropriate? And if so, then we consider it to be a competent communication. We consider that person to be a competent communicator in that instance. And communication competence is relational, as in it changes who you're talking to, and it's learned. It's something that we learn through time and through other people. And that's awesome, because it means that we have an opportunity to get better at it. we find that effective communication, it can be defined as achieving goals while maintaining or enhancing the relationship. But there's really no ideal way to communicate, which in a way can be a little scary, but in a way it can be a lot of fun because we get to practice. We get to practice through different situations. Communication competence is situational. Communication competence is relational. It changes by the person we're talking to. And communication competence is learned. It's a learned skill. Communication in general is a learned skill. And we learn it by practicing it, thinking about it, and working on it. So if you'd like to be a better communicator, congratulations, you're in the right place. That's what this class is for. Thank you for your time.